we're particularly pleased because this is a critically important topic for our Northeast Ohio community. And to guide us through it, we want to welcome Juan Galeano. Since November, he has served as a consultant for the Cleveland Foundation on the 2020 census. He is our go-to person. Prior to this, he served as a Lideres Fellow, selected by the Hispanics in Philanthropy for that honor. Prior to that, he was a National Urban Fellow at the Cleveland Foundation. He is the son of Colombian immigrants and the first in his family to go to college, but he didn't stop there. He went on to earn a master's in public administration. He describes himself as the kid from Queens, New York, and we're very happy that he left Queens and decided to make a difference here in Northeast Ohio. We're not the first community where he is leaving his fingerprints, because he previously served as a community organizer in Central Florida. He's been very innovative in his approach to how to get people to respond to the census. He launched Why We Count, a community-focused art contest, and he is clearly very dedicated to making sure that we show up as a community and be counted. So Juan, tell us how we can help you in this important work, and thank you for joining us.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Marianne, for that very warm introduction. I'm looking forward to talking to you today about the census. Really, the theme of the conversation, what I wanted to focus on today was what it is and why it's important. What are some of the efforts that are currently happening right here in Cuyahoga and in Cleveland overall? What our current response rate is, and how you can help in that effort. Before I continue with the presentation, I wanted to ask for all of you who can, if you could put whether you have filled out the census in the chat box. Just a yes or no, want to do a quick poll to see how we're doing on this conversation. So while you do that, I'll continue on with the presentation. So what is the census? It's a nationwide head count required of us every 10 years. And normally it's done from March until the end of July. This year it's been extended, but it's one of the largest operations that happens outside of a war for our country. So it's a very important and fundamental initiative that we do every 10 years. Why does it matter? The funds that come from the census are split throughout the country and are allocated based on the data in the census. It also determines how many representatives we have in Congress, how many votes our state has in the Electoral College, and it impacts our quality of life through where businesses decide to open and in other ways as well. And taking part is one of your civic duties. To give you an idea of what's at stake for Ohio overall, this map shows areas that are at risk of losing a congressional seat. So Ohio is at risk of losing one congressional seat, and that means having less influence in Washington and having less influence in selecting a president. So that is something that if we don't perform well, that might very well be a reality. As far as the federal funding piece, an estimate from Georgetown showed that over $33 billion annually came from the census. And this affects Medicaid, highway funding, community block grants, and affects some of the most vulnerable residents in our community. So making sure we fill out the census helps to make sure we get resources to the people we love, to the people who are our neighbors. Why else is it important? It also helps the media paint a picture of what's happening in the city, where we're growing, where we're shrinking. The census data is used to tell about demographics, average age, and everything else. The private sector uses the data to be able to determine where to open shops, where to open locations, and also when they're trying to recruit talent to come to their organization, the census data is how they tell the story of the city as well. And for the public sector, it determines our representation and is connected to funding, as I mentioned before. So that's a little bit about the census overall. I wanted to talk to you about what we're doing locally. So there are several efforts that are happening, some within individual organizations and some a little bit more coordinated. So we've been partners with the Cuyahoga Complete Count Committee and the Cleveland Complete Count Committee. Both are operating right now. And also the Ohio Census Advocacy Coalition. That's a partner organization made up of groups throughout the state to increase the count. The effort that I'm going to share with you about today is the Complete Count CLE effort, and that's been supported mainly through the George Gunn Foundation, the Fowler Family Foundation, St. Luke's Foundation, and the Cleveland Foundation. And some of the key partners leading that effort are Global Cleveland, Cleveland Votes, and several grantee partners that have been able to really get out the count in very creative ways. So when we started this effort, our main plan was to focus on trusted spaces, trusted voices, and personalized messaging. Our trusted spaces were places like churches, libraries, and coffee shops and things like that. With the whole pandemic, those places had to shut down, so we had to support partners to shift to more virtual settings. And when we first made the round of grants, we didn't realize that was going to be a problem. We made it like the first week of March, and then a week later, everything changed. But the approach we took in this effort was we did not want to have one group determine what should happen and what should be the strategy for reaching out to the different hard to count communities. We felt like the nonprofit partners are the people on the ground. They know their communities best. Instead of taking a centralized approach, we decided to take a decentralized approach and fund different nonprofit groups that work with communities that are identified as hard to count. The ones that we had particular focus on were international refugee populations, families with children under 5, the Latinx population, college students, homeless populations, and neighborhoods that had a low participation rate in the last 2010 census. So those were the groups we were focusing on. And when we made the RFP available, we had over 200 groups apply and 50 were funded for $153,000. So we think about this as like 50 groups all kind of building their civic engagement muscle to figure out ways to get their communities to count. And we hope that these lessons will be applied to other things moving forward. But we thought that it was critical that it be decentralized. So I just want to share a couple of examples of some of the different nonprofit partners and what they did. Midtown is a CD Community Development Corporation that as part of their service area is Asiatown. And so they worked with local restaurants in the community to include census material and information in English and in Chinese and other languages so that people could fill out the census. They created census kits and knocked on doors and dropped it off at homes. And they also have created incentive contests where if you show that you submitted your census form through the online ID number, you can get some food at a local restaurant. So that supports their local community restaurants and also encourages people to fill out the census. So those are the type of things that if we were trying to be centralized, we would not be able to be nuanced enough to figure out. Another group is the Black Child Development Institute, and they started doing Facebook Lives where they had authors read children's book to their audiences. And while they were doing that, they did a plug about the census and had families turn in a completed census like ID number and were eligible to win a prize to get groceries, a grocery gift card. So that's another way an incentive can help encourage people to fill it out while also sticking to their mission and trying out new things that they didn't do before. Another group is from Mikos, and they did a caravan where they had their big blue van drive around their service areas in Glenville, Huff, and St. Clair Superior. They had information about the census. They gave out ice cream to kids, and they had a QR code on their bus that people could link to and fill out the census by doing that, but also just answering questions and busting myths that they might have heard to encourage people to fill it out. And that type of one-on-one outreach is so important. But it shows you how creative our nonprofit partners are. Refugee Response created a short video, less than 2 minutes long, and translated in several different languages that was able to be shared through WhatsApp and different platforms that some of our different refugee and international members of the community use, so that they can know what the census is and hopefully feel more encouraged to fill it out. So that's something that was also used. And lastly, the Hispanic Business Center, they recruited some of the local business leaders that they work with to talk about why the census matters for them. And they made a short video about that. They not only kind of plug their business, but they also encourage their community to fill out the census. So those are all different types of nonprofit examples of the work that's happening. And each group is doing it in a unique way that best serves their community. Then the other effort we did was we launched the website completecountcli.org that shares all the different nonprofit partners, and we highlight their work so that other people can see. It also has the current response rate and how we're doing, along with resources in different languages and to serve different communities, along with a monthly town hall where it's like a community of practice for the grantees to learn from each other, a bi-monthly newsletter, and we've been doing one-on-one consultations with partners to help navigate what's happening with COVID and how they could still do the work in a way that respects physical distancing. So that's been something that we've also really focused on. But that's been the summary of our effort, but how are we doing as a community overall? So if you look at this chart here, Ohio and Cuyahoga County overall, the current response rate, which is the middle column, is pretty close to the final response rate in 2010. It's about 2.5% away from that number. So we know more work needs to be done, but we're feeling confident that we're going to be close, or we're going to be surpassing that. One area of red flag is Cleveland's current response rate. It's 10% away from where it was in 2010. And so what that means is less resources for our inner city that are going to be lost, and makes the work of nonprofit organizations, makes the work of foundation, makes the work of business much more harder, because there are going to be less resources that are going to be serving the really high needs that exist in our community. So if you think about this, the normal deadline would have been the end of July. So we're talking about maybe 2 weeks or so, and there's no way we would have made up that difference. Luckily, there is going to be, it is extended until October 31st. We have more time, but that just creates an urgency to make sure that for anyone who hasn't filled it out yet, please encourage them to do so. The census workers haven't even started knocking on doors yet. That doesn't happen until August 11th. So we don't want those door knockers to spend resources on people who might more likely fill it out. We want them to really focus on their hard to count. So if you haven't filled it out yet, please do so and encourage your loved ones. This chart shows you like how we're doing compared to national. Ohio's doing a little bit better. But then we wanted to do a micro look into some specific neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland. And if you can see here, like 3 neighborhoods that have a lower participation rate are downtown, Mount Pleasant, and Huff. And our intention is we're going to have another round of grants that is going to be made available towards the end of this month. And we want to focus all of those efforts in neighborhoods that have a low census participation rate, understanding that we need to get everyone counted. So we're looking at this on a very granular level, and we want to really focus that attention on some of those neighborhoods and areas where we're not doing as well. Other areas in Cuyahoga that aren't doing well are Lindale and East Cleveland, and we also want to get some additional resources there to build up that count. So what can you do? You can first and foremost fill out your census questionnaire. The website is on the screen. If you prefer doing a phone option, that's also there. But if you can encourage at least 5 people you know within your circle of trust to also fill out the census, or ask them if they have, you'd be surprised how many people you think would have filled it out already haven't. And so we really want to have people that we are in close contact with fill it out, and start conversations within your networks or spheres of influence you can be like the Hispanic Business Center and make a video about why it matters to you as well, and maybe encourage other people to do that. But within like the nonprofit boards you serve in, or the nonprofits you're a part of, or within your business, encouraging team members to fill it out can go a long way. And that personal ask is very powerful. So that can't go far enough, and it's going to take all of us owning this for it to succeed, because it's going to affect us for the next decade and longer. So with that, I'll turn it back to Rachel and answer any questions for the group.
Great, Juan. Thank you so much for sharing the projects and the data and understanding the importance of the census. So we do have a few questions that have come in. Does the Complete Count CLE effort collaborate or in any way communicate with the area census office of the Census Bureau?
Yes, we work mainly and most closely with the Complete Count committees from Cuyahoga and the city of Cleveland, but we also are in contact with the partnership specialist, Dr. Nada Markonovich, and she has helped in giving us, sharing resources and helping inform us and the nonprofit partners on how to do it the right way.
So the projects that you've funded thus far, do you have metrics on their impact or anecdotes of the experience they've had when doing their outreach in their communities?
I think the census map, there's like a census map that tracks how the communities are doing. So we're working on a way to be able to look at, so this week an event happened, how much did the number jump? And we're working with like the census data team to figure out how to do that in a better way. So that's one thing we're working on. But I think the most important thing about this effort is these grants that we've been making to nonprofit partners, for the most part, are between 1,000 to 5,000. So they're not very like huge grants. And I think the real benefit of this is that it's building that civic engagement muscle for the nonprofit organizations and trying things outside of their normal experience. So, for example, like we've had some nonprofits that haven't done text messaging before, that through this grant were able to start doing like text messaging campaigns and encouraging their people to participate in their work. And that has been like, you know, a new muscle and capacity that the organization has built. There's organizations that have done new events like caravans, going through their neighborhood and encouraging people to fill out the census and other things like that. So this has really been like an opportunity to build capacity and experiment with new things that I think are going to have long-lasting impacts, and building that civic engagement muscle, which is one of the main goals of this effort. But as far as like from direct effort of like an action to the impact on the completion rate, we're honing that in to do better, and that's something that we want to really build up as well. So, yes.
So from what you've seen and what you've heard, what barriers exist for people in our community in completing the census?
I think one of the biggest challenges is the digital divide. Not having quality internet service or having access to a computer. We were counting on the library as being a big, really big, like organizing space where a lot of people could come and fill out the census and even get guidance on how to do it if they're not like very savvy on operating a computer. But with COVID shutting down a lot of those spaces, that hasn't happened. So that's a really big reason why I think the numbers are lower than they are. And we haven't had any census workers do any door knocking. So for some of our seniors who really aren't comfortable with computers, but also aren't able to reach out to their community like they normally do by maybe going to the library or going to those coffee shops or other congregating spaces, they aren't getting those reminders that they might have gotten before. So that's something between kind of our physical distancing and not being able to get those reinforcements to the spaces shutting down, to the digital divide. And then lastly, I think the distrust in government is another big reason that people don't fill it out as much. people not being comfortable sharing their information for whatever reason. There's a lot of misinformation about the census, like people might lose their benefits for filling it out, or there's an immigration question that makes people feel intimidated.
We did have a question come in that said, if a person has misplaced the ID number to complete the census online, how can someone request a duplicate ID?
The ID number is like when you log on to my2020census.gov, there's a place that you can click that says, I lost my ID number, or I don't have it, and you could still log in through the system and fill it out. The main thing that that number is connected to is a physical address. So as long as you can put in your physical address, you can get through the application without a problem.
So I know much of what you focused on was data in the city of Cleveland, but a question has come in specifically around efforts being made in the East Cleveland area.
Sure. Yes, East Cleveland has, I think, like a 30% census participation rate from what I last saw maybe like a day or two ago. And we've been working mainly with the East Cleveland Public Library as one of the main partners, and also with NOAA, the NOAA organization, and they're based in East Cleveland, do a lot of really good organizing work. So we've been working mainly with those partners and making grants to them. I think, how do we activate spaces? How do we encourage people to fill it out and make them feel comfortable with filling it out? I think that's going to be key moving forward, and that's definitely an area where, for this next round of grants, we want to put more attention to as well.
And can you describe how you collaborate with efforts across the city and the county?
Sure. I think we've been inviting those partners to come to our monthly Zoom calls, and from early on, we were going to each other's meetings and sitting in on them. Many of the organizational partners, like the Cuyahoga CMSD, the Housing Authority, and other groups, have been a part of those groups, and also have been a part of some of the grant recipients of the micro grants that we've made available. So we've had a lot of partners that participate in those efforts, and so that synergy brings us together as well. So we're promoting each other's events and things like that, and attending each other's meetings. So I think it's such a large effort and requires so much coordination that it's hard to always be in sync. But I think the intention behind all of our efforts is to connect those dots and fill the gaps wherever they might exist. So we try to do that by sharing each other's plans and jumping in on where and when we can, when it makes the most sense.
So a question around there have been a lot of comments that people of color might be even more underrepresented in the census this year. And you've mentioned efforts specifically around targeted neighborhoods, but are there additional efforts specifically targeting various minority communities throughout Cleveland?
I think some of the ways that that's happened are through, like, we've been making grants available to those trusted organizations that serve those communities. So, like, for Global Cleveland has been one. They've been a grantee, and they've reached out to the refugee populations. We had a town hall with them, and we found out that in many of the refugees communities where their country of origin, they had a bad experience with something similar to a census in their country. And so even having to kind of break those barriers down is so important. And the only way that happens is if a trusted voice talks to them about it. So I think that having that trusted partner that can spread the message is the best approach. And that's really what we focused on. So we've been working with partners that serve specifically like the Latinx community. We've been working with partners that serve like the Russian immigrant community as well. Like Us Together has been another partner. And so we've tried to touch different communities from like other organizations that serve the Muslim and Arabic community as well. So we've tried to focus on and support partners that touch and are trusted in different areas, because we realize each needs its own message. And sometimes you need that one-on-one talk to be able to get through it and make someone feel comfortable to do that. And as a single entity, we don't have the capacity to do that, but those partners who are already on the ground, who can tie it into what they're already doing, are the best equipped to do that.
And we have one final question that just came in. So are more census workers needed? If so, what positions are you looking to fill?
Well, I don't work for the U.S. Census Office. That would be better directed towards like our partnership specialist, Dr. Nada Makonovich. But I would be glad to share that information with Rachel afterwards, and she could send it in a follow-up email or however would be best. But from my understanding, they're still hiring, and so that would be a great way to contribute and support the efforts on the ground, because that door knocking is going to be so important, reaching out to some of the communities that haven't counted yet.
Juan, thank you so much for sharing your work and the data today. We will be sharing the PowerPoint presentation, so you will have access to the data in the follow-up email, along with links to follow up with some of the websites that Juan mentioned. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Marianne.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And Juan, thanks for all that you are doing. We look forward to hearing reports in November of a successful census drive. And we hope that when this is over, that you do not leave Cleveland and return to become that kid from Queens again. Please stay with us. We need you here.